Smooth 98.1. It is gone past 7:30 on this Friday morning, and it's freshly pressed time here on Smooth Breakfast. I'm Sope Martins, and joining me for the next half hour, I've got Ikemesit Effiong in with me. Good morning, Ikemesit.
Morning, Lagos. Great to be here. How are you?
Wonderful, and it's wonderful to have you on the show. Now, we've got some big news, lots of big news
Mm,
actually to discuss.
yeah,
And
yeah.
for you to join the conversation and share your reactions, share your thoughts, your opinions, all you need to do is on the live stream, leave a comment in the comment section, and I'll be able to get your messages across on the show. So we're streaming live currently on YouTube. So on the app, search for Smooth 981. If you're going to go on the website, www.youtube.com/smooth981fm. Okay, we are also taking messages on WhatsApp. The number for that is 0809 440 If you're listening from out of the country, put the country code +234. And up on Twitter, we are at Smooth981FM. Tag us in your tweet and use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981. All right, so it kind of said first thing is first. Looks like we have a suspension of a strike. Now, from the Punch newspaper and across all the other national dailies, ASUU suspends strike after 8 months. Ha! The Academic Staff Union of Universities has suspended its eight-month-old strike. It was officially confirmed about an hour ago. I saw on their Twitter handle, with lectures to resume on Monday, this coming Monday, the 17th of October. Ikemesit, finally, it has happened, and it took so long to get here.
Yes, did. Finally, it has happened. It's definitely a positive development. I should say though that the structural issues continue to drive repeated repeated workers' actions, right, by university lecturers, still remain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's certainly still present here. There's understanding on the part of both ASUU and the federal government that more discussion needs to happen. It's worth noting what of ASUU to the point it had to suspend the strike. There is a court case right now pending at the Court of Appeal. The federal government had ASUU to the National Industrial Court, basically stating that since it in effect pays most of the federal and state university lecturers, it has to order them as their employer back to work, right? It was sort of a Hail Mary last-ditch effort to break the impasse, right, as prevailed between ASUU and the federal government for the past 8 months. The federal government was able to get judgment in its favor in the National Industrial Court, but ASUU appealed to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal said the Court of Appeal has not heard the substantive appeal, right? But the Court of Appeal made a judgment that university lecturers basically have to back to work while suit, right, remain for it, and it actually looks at it that it has no okay. So basically, the court says that in order for it to hear ASUU's side of the story as well as the federal government's reply, it has to university lecturers have to essentially back to work. Right?
Ah.
So it's on the basis of that court decision. Femi Falana, who is ASUU's lead counsel, right, had actually hinted on Monday that the strike was going to be called off imminently. And so what has happened today, the announcement from ASUU, all of the reporting that you're seeing in the national press this morning, is basically the culmination of that effort, right? And I mean, all those legal developments that have occurred over the last 2 weeks.
Right. All right. We've got more on legal developments and courts. So this one is a big one from another big one from the Nation newspaper. Now, jubilation as court frees Nnamdi Kanu. This is the Court of Appeal sitting in Abuja. on Thursday, yesterday, upholding the appeal of the detained leader of IPOB. And the article goes on to say that there was wild jubilation in Anambra over the ruling by the Court of Appeal. Ikemesit, over to you.
Oh yes, this is major Nnamdi Kanu has been since.
Oh, hold on, Ikemesit, we didn't quite get that.
Okay, I said this is a major development, right? So Nnamdi Kanu has been in DSS custody since June of last year, and he has actually been in out of the courts pretty much throughout the Buhari years. So this is a major development. Basically, what the Court of Appeal said in striking out all of the terrorism charges, and there were 7 of them, right, against Nnamdi Kanu, that the Federal High Court fundamentally lacked the jurisdiction to entertain the suit. Not because it wasn't competent enough to beat, but because of the circumstance under which Nnamdi Kanu ended in front of that court. Now, Kanu was extradited from Kenya, right, in June last year, under circumstances which the federal government and the DSS have refused to adequately clarify. And
yes,
so
despite, by the way, not
Appeal,
even just authorities and
denied it for the
here asking, but even other countries asking, how exactly did you manage to get him back in?
Yeah, precisely right. And so what the Court of Appeal said was that Nnamdi Kanu's extradition was a flagrant violation of Nigeria's extradition treaty in Kenya. It was a breach of fundamental human rights as a Nigerian citizen. And the fact that, the government's legal team did not deny that fact, right, in open thought, again gave merit to Kanu's appeal to the Court of Appeal to in essence, conviction quashed. Now, the Court of Appeal now ordered the DSS to release him, and this has generally been well received by important political elements, primarily in the Southeast. I should say it's worth noting that the government's track record generally in terms of obeying and abiding with court decisions leaves a lot to be desired. So it is unclear if the government and the DSS would actually allow for the enforcement of these verdicts. There was a situation with, I think it was Ibrahim El-Zakzaky, right, the leader of the Islamic movement of Nigeria, the umbrella Shia Muslim group, where after he got a positive verdict, right at the Federal High Court, literally on the court's doorsteps as he was walking out, he was rearrested by the DSS. And so, this happened, I think this was early last year or maybe in 2020. My recollection doesn't serve me well at this point in time. And so that's the one cloud, right, underlying, all of the joy that Kanu, IPOB, Kanu sympathizers are probably feeling.
Ikemesit, in your opinion, how big of a worry should that possibility be, considering how rule of law has fared under this current administration? Can you talk on that a little?
It's a significant fear. I think it's something that Nigerians need to be concerned about, right? I mean, it's Nnamdi Kanu now, it's ASUU now, right? It could very well be one of us, or it could be an institution which is considered more fundamental to how our democracy operates. It might be, just to give an offhand example, not that this is actually happening. It could be INEC, for example, since we are in election season. And so the fact that the government has a less than desired track record in adhering to judicial pronouncements should be a thing of concern to Nigerians, because once the floodgates are open and there are people who are deemed as exceptions to the application of the rule of law, really it's open season for anyone, right, who who seeks to have, any rights, right, enforced by the judicial system.
Okay, so and final question on this: what can the people, because sometimes when it's we to look at these things, we feel very far away from them. Oh, so we have seen a flagrant disregard of courts rulings. What can we do?
I think it's just to keep agitating for it, right? The power dynamic between the government and and the electorate is significantly skewed and lopsided in favor of the government. But it's not. I mean, I keep saying there is value in noise in democratic settings, and so continually talking about it, making it an election issue. This is, that time within the democratic life cycle where,
The
elected
balance of power
representatives
is
have to,
actually skewed a
yeah,
little
the
bit in
balance of
favor of
power
the.
flips, right? Yeah, yeah, to the other side. And so making it an election issue and getting elected representatives, especially those within the legislature, who actually have institutional frameworks and mechanisms for compelling the executive, right, to pay attention to these things, would certainly help. And so that's one thing that, we as electors need to keep driving home. And I think this is the perfect time, right, 3 months out from national elections, to make that argument forceful and convincing.
All right. I see your messages coming in across the different platforms. After we take our next story, I'll get over to them. So keep on sending them to WhatsApp 0809 triple 40981, and send to Twitter as well, hashtag freshly pressed 981. And also leave your comments on the live stream on youtube.com/smooth 981 FM Lagos. Sometimes it feels as though we can't get away from the word strike when it comes to the articles that we read in our newspapers. From the Daily Trust, hazard allow pardon me, from the Daily Trust, hazard allowance, health workers issue 7 days ultimatum to federal government. And so this is the Senior Staff Association of Universities, Teaching Hospitals, and Research Institutes and Associated Institutions, a name that results in an acronym that defies all acronyms, Ikemesit, but still, the story
Yeah.
is real. They've issued a 7-day ultimatum to the federal government to pay the arrears of hazard allowances owed to its members. And now the association alleged that the government had selectively paid 4 and 5 months in tranches to doctors and sidelined the other health workers.
Yes, they are all concerned that there was a special inducement allowance that was instituted for health workers, right, who were involved in the country's efforts to manage the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. Only 60% of that fund has been paid out. So the association, which sounds good to a Hindu term, I mean, if you look at the acronym, how it's rendered, but I digress. The association is asking, right, that the remaining 40% balance, right, being 2 months pay in effect, right, that's owed to his members be paid, right. And so this is one of those things in which, it's in keeping with the ethos with so commitments and promises that the government has made to important important operators, important actors, socioeconomic.
It kind of says, just 1 second, could you take it from the top for us again, please?
Okay, so this current ultimatum, right, around hazard allowance for health workers is keeping with this ethos. It's sort of also applicable with ASUU,
Okay.
where where the government promises important actors within the country's socio-economic space, and it doesn't uphold promises. And what the association is basically saying is that the government has 7 days, but it's a lot of time. These are areas and back pay, which are which have been owed for months and months, and the government basically has 7 days to either pay up, or in essence, the country's health sector will be shut down.
All right, so what I'm going to do right now is take some of your messages across the platforms on hashtag Freshly Press 981 on Twitter, 20809 on WhatsApp, and of course the comment section on YouTube, where Abigail, or Suriliri Abigail, has joined in from Dubai. Good one. Share your thoughts on that comment on that section. Okay, going over to WhatsApp now. Who is this? Idima Puza from Surulere says, until Namdi Kanu is finally released, nobody should jubilate yet. Because I know, says Idima Puza, that there are powerful people who don't want him to be free. So let's just watch and see what happens. Ike says, on the Namdi Kanu judgment, the fact is that the government's case was weak and further undermined by the unlawful extraordinary rendition. Whilst Dami from Ikeja says, Namdi Kanu isn't leaving the Yellow House unless ASUU Rock says so. Adebowale chimes in on the ASUU strike, says it's been called off, and the fact that it's been called off and the release of Namdi Kanu sounds a bit like a conspiracy, in my opinion, by the current government to divide the strength of the populace campaigning for. Oh wow, this is such a conspiracy theory, Adebowale from Ikeja. But you're allowed it. I'm also allowed to move on to the other messages, so I think I shall do that. But thank you for sending that in. Osisioma says, ASUU has no option but to call off the protracted strike action after the court ruled in favor of that, although the government herself flouts court orders with impunity. ASUU members henceforth should desist from assisting to install unscrupulous leaders through the announcement of manipulated and falsified results. Oh, okay. That's an interesting one. Cruz says, at this rate, everyone that the federal government is owing should just come out and form a single file. Who else do we have?
Sounds like a sensible strategy, if you ask me.
Order. Chukwuemeka from Ikorodu says, weighs in with his opinion on Nnamdi Kanu's releasing. It's political, but it can't confuse us from voting. And we've got more. Oh, D from Alausa says, please, can you clarify if the government can appeal the Nnamdi Kanu judgment? Ikemesit?
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you take that again?
D from Alausa says, can you clarify if the government can appeal the Nnamdi Kanu judgment?
Yes, it can. It can. Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
it can take it to the Supreme Court.
Okay, so we go higher and higher until there's no more sky past the sky. Jonah from Isolo says, this case might go up to the Supreme Court, and the government might still not obey the courts. There's hope. There's lots of hope that they will. All right, so moving on now, let's take a look at this one in from The Guardian. Federal government faults UNESCO's report, says only 2.8 million out of school. So in a report last month, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization had revealed that Nigeria, with the challenges of insecurity and kidnapping of school children, has 20 million children out of school. But according to the Director of Senior Secondary Education at the Federal Ministry of Education, Hajia Binta Abdul Kadir, she faulted this claim yesterday, saying that it's 2.8, that they managed to get the number down to 2.8. But it comes to, there's a huge difference between 20 million and 2.8 million, wouldn't she say? But apart from the stark difference in these numbers, what else does the discrepancy say?
It says that the federal government, in large part, doesn't have a handle on the problem, right? So it was setting this in some context. So the operating number, right, from both UNESCO and the Federal Ministry of Education before UNESCO's updated report earlier, last month, right, was I think 8.8 million children that are out of school, and that had been the operating estimates since 2018. Right, yeah. So in effect, what the government's new argument, right, is that, what the government's new argument is that not only is UNESCO's updated number um, um, patently false, but that it has so, I mean, it has so got, I mean, it has such a handle on the problem that it has actually drastically reduced those numbers from sort of its historical plateau, which when you look at the reality on the ground, you look at anecdotal evidence, you're thinking about the ramp of insecurity in large parts of the country. And it's worth noting that these numbers are geographically concentrated in parts of the Northwest and the Northeast, right, of the country, with a smattering in the North Central geopolitical zone. So there's a heavy geographic concentration, right, to these numbers, right, and just a smattering of out of school kids from the rest of the country. When you look at the elevated security challenges, right, that the country is facing right now, it is hard to justify quantitatively the government's numbers, right? Because it's not as though security has been gotten on a hill and funding for basic education has increased significantly, that we've been able to get a lot more kids, right, into schools. So I struggle with the federal ministry's argument, right, in this light, and it appears as though the reality in many states and in many parts of this country, we've had, and SBM has been tracking this, we've had almost 1,000 school closures, for example, between June 2021 and August of this year, right? Which is, I think, the last time that we were able to track data on this. So you look at school closures, you look at rising insecurity, you look at the fact that education funding still remains constrained, and you're wondering, how was the Federal Ministry of Education able to get, let's stick with the historical 8.8 million number, how were they able to get 6 million additional children back into school in the light of all of these things? It defies reasoning and understanding, right? Yeah.
Now, Ikemesit, you talked about the geographical skewing of these numbers, right? And one thing that I want to ask is, so we've heard about the Northeast Stabilization and Development Master Plan 2020 to 2030, right? And part of that is, part of the focus of that is education. So do you think that we can see, is there hope on the horizon where we can see, actually, you know what, these numbers will be even more drastically, if we go by the official word, even more drastically reduced? And if we go by the unofficial numbers, or other official numbers, still drastically reduced, is there still hope on that?
Yeah, that's a fair point that you make, which is that 2.8 million is small compared to 20 million, but that's still a lot of children that aren't in school. There are things that can be done, right? And so this is one of those challenges which is not intractable, right, as it were. So there are things that can be done to quickly have these numbers under control, get more children in school. The fundamental one that I've been advocating for is that more funding has to go into basic education, right? To start with, one of the challenges with the way we have funded and managed tertiary education and how we've struggled to placate ASUU and university lecturers, over the last half decade at least, is that a lot of funding that goes into education and not a lot of money. We are not spending a lot of money on education. So that has to change. A lot of that money has been very top heavy. So it's been heavily concentrated towards not just tertiary education, but actually university education. It's not as though the polytechnics are actually seeing a lot of resources allocated to them, right? We need to get out of that space. Government needs to get out of funding tertiary education so that we free up more resources for primary and secondary education.
Yeah.
Which is where the bulk of our educational challenges, right, lie. So that's work that we can do. The overall budgetary allocation for education has to be increased, and also basic education is a shared responsibility between the federal and state governments, and so state governments also need to increase funding, training for teachers, resource allocation in terms of books, a more aggressive infrastructural plan in terms of building new schools, expanding capacity for existing educational facilities, or upgrading facilities, right? Because our schools are not exactly the best environments in which, learning can be carried out. So there are lots of things that we can do within a very short space of time to get kids in. There's something that a couple of other states, I think Sokoto and Jigawa, right, have pioneered, which is penalizing parents who do not send their kids to school. That's also, so there are moving parts to this, right, that we can begin to use to shift the blocks around and begin to get this problem right under control.
All right, let's take a look at this next story that comes in from The Nation. 126 more Nigerians return from Libya, says the headline. Now, this according to the acting coordinator of the Lagos Territorial Office of the National Emergency Management Agency, Mr. Ibrahim Farinloye, who represented the Director General, Alhaji Mustafa Ahmed. Well, according to him, the returnees were brought back to the country by the International Organization for Migration through a voluntary repatriation program. And he went on to say that it's meant for distressed Nigerians who left the country to seek greener pastures and found that it was dry and brown outside, and so wanted to come home but didn't have the funds to come home, and so now they're back. Ikemesit, your take.
Well, yeah, I mean, the story is really self-explanatory, right? Farinloye said that, Mr. Farinloye said that Nigerians should be more should exercise more discretion, right? When you see all of these ads that pop up online, or you have relatives, you have loved ones who tell you, oh, there's this program, there's this pathway towards emigrating primarily to the Middle East, right? But also to pockets of Southern Europe, Italy and Greece, right, also comes to mind. And he says that what happens is that many Nigerians can end up in halfway homes and halfway facilities in places like Libya and Egypt, and they never get to, those destinations. And so it's really a pipe dream. More Nigerians should pay attention to the fact that, these promises are funnels for human trafficking rings. There was this really jarring, I think, Deutsche Welle documentary from last year that spotlighted, how Nigerians and West Africans, right, in general, end up in places like Libya, and they end up being trafficked, and they're used, right, as domestic servants. Some are used, right, as sex slaves, for example. And so it makes sense, right, for people to be cognizant of the risk item. Basically, if it sounds too good, it feels too good, it probably is too good to be true.
All right, and Ikemesit, what do you think of the President Buhari's plea to Gulf of Guinea member states to pay up their annual contributions so that the body can fulfill its mandate?
Yeah, so this is the Gulf of Guinea Commission, which is an umbrella body of coastal West African states. It was set up in 2001, and it largely has a mandate to enhance, cooperation primarily around security, right? In the Gulf of Guinea. Gulf of Guinea is the most challenged waters from a piracy and an economic sabotage standpoint in all of the world. Insurance rates, right? We want to import anything to this part of the world are the highest in the world. And so the states came together to set up this commission to coordinate their efforts, primarily around security. And what the president said, through a statement that was issued by his office, is that, states have been underfunding their commitments. They need to fund that. There was a conference we just wrapped up, which I think Nigeria hosted, right, where he made that plea. And so this basically underscores the need for more leadership, primarily from Nigeria, right, and within the wider West African region. Nigeria has actually regressed and taking, a step back. You have countries like Ghana that are more aggressively taking up that leadership role within the region. So maybe this is baby steps in sort of auto-correcting, right, from a Nigerian foreign policy standpoint, some of the regression that we've seen in Nigeria taking a more forceful stance when it comes to issues of common interest, right?
Yeah, taking back the ground.
Region.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we've come to the end of the show. Ikemesit has been an absolute dream having you on to analyze these different topics. So I'm sure we'll get some more information from the biggest of the stories, and all of these. Thank you so much. And people, find him up on social media. He is at Judge Ike. All right, IYKE. That's how it spells.